So for this example, for this second example, for a short time, the path of the plane is described um, by the equation y is equal to 0.001 x squared meter. And if the plane is rising with a constant velocity of 10 meters per second, what you need to determine are the magnitudes of the velocity and acceleration of the plane when it is at y is equal to 100 meters. So, ang kailangan nato pangitaon here ay kay ang magnitude sa velocity and also the acceleration. Shown here sa ato ang answers at the right side, the magnitude of your velocity is 18.7 meters per second and acceleration is 0.791 meter per second squared. So just a solution for this example, the difference of this, for this second example sa compare sa first example na gidiscuss na ko last time is that there is no equation which describes the x and y components with respect to the time. Kaya di ba sa gidiscuss na to tong first example, we have actually one equation that is x equals to 80. So that represents the horizontal path with respect to time. Kaya di ba ako giingon last time, when you determine the magnitude of the velocity and acceleration, the two components, which are the x and y components, must be expressed as a function with respect to time. So mao to na atay variable na t. Pero in this case, sa ato ang second example, sa atong second example, this is actually an example kung asa wala tay given na equation that describes the horizontal or vertical path or position with respect to time. Ang given lang ani is the equation of the path, that is y is equal to 0.001 x squared. Mao lang na ang given sa ato ang second example. We have also the plane is rising with a constant velocity of 10 meters per second. Magamit po data na siya sa ato ang pag-solve aning problem. And also, we have a given distance that is along y, which is equal to 100 meters. So since wala tay a function that is with respect to time, what we actually do is we use chain rule of calculus. I don't know if you still remember the definition of chain rule. Diba when we say chain rule, it is actually a method that help us differentiate composite functions. So when we talk about composite functions, that is a function that depends on another function. So when we talk about composite function, it is a function that depends on another function. So in our case, we have actually a composite function that is y is equal to 0.001 x squared. This is an equation that relates the x and y. So x, ang value sa tong y is nagadepende sa tong value sa x component nato. So for the chain rule, for this example, is we will apply chain rule of calculus. So the same lang atong buhaton sa first example, for the solution for this one, so solution, we start on establishing the coordinate system. Na naman tayo coordinate system dire, which describes the direction or the motion of your particle or your object, the path of the plane rather. So sa kaning figure nato, that will be our coordinate system. I need to adjust first my mic. Okay, so just a continuation, like what I've said, the figure shown here is considered as the coordinate system of your problem that shows the path of your plane, and also it describes the motion of your plane, which is y is equal to 0.001 x squared. And here, it acts along quadrant 1, meaning its x and y component, both x and y components are positive. So after we identify or establish the coordinate system, the next is we apply kinematic equations. Diba, the same sa first example na akong gidiscuss last Tuesday, we divide into x and y component. Here, let us consider first the y component. Ang sa y component nato, especially sa x, both x and y component, di ba itong kailangan kay it must be an expression that is with respect to the time. So, mo na kailangan natay either of these two components is not natay equation given sa problem. But what happened is that based sa itong problem, wala tay equation with respect to time. So, ang gamiton nato ani is chain rule. And for the y component, if you read again the second statement, if the plane is rising with a constant velocity of 10 meters per second, that value is actually our y component of your velocity, meaning that is your Vy. So, in our koan, since pag-determine sa magnitude of velocity, di ba, gamiton man nato ang Pythagorean theorem, square root of Vx squared plus Vy squared. Ang 10 meters per second is actually the value of your Vy. So, nanatay Vy. Ang atong problemahon na lang is si Vx or the x component of your velocity. So, what do you mean of the constant velocity? Unsa man ang pasabotan na kung ang velocity is constant? Kung if ever mag-determine ta sa iyang acceleration, what will happen if, what will be the value rather, what will be the value of your acceleration if the velocity is constant? Pila tong value sa acceleration if the velocity is, that is, what was that?
0.
That is 0. So meaning, pag determine sa y component sa acceleration, since constant man natong Vy, so therefore, ang ato ang Ay ani would be equal to 0. So atong problemahon ng ani nato sa atong solution is the x component. So the Vy is a constant. And since it is rising, meaning positive. So positive y siya, positive Vy, so that is positive 10 meters per second. So that will be Vy is equal to positive 10 meters per second. Um, Unay direction, 10 meters per second upward, rising, or positive 10 meters per second. And your y component is a constant. So nalatay y component sa velocity, and especially sa pag-determine sa y component sa acceleration, that is equal to 0. Okay, constant naman na ito ang Vy. For the x component, we need to determine the value of Vx. So since, like what I've said kanina, waman tay ing ani na equation, kung asa ang equation is a function of time, it's only the path of the plane that is described by y is equal to 0.001 x squared. So atong buhaton is we use chain rule of calculus. So we will use this equation, y is equal to 0.001 x squared. So for this, we will differentiate this equation using chain rule. So pag differentiate ani, that is differentiate nato ni siya with respect to time. So ang derivative sa y, that would be dy over dt or vy, or using dot notation, that is y dot. So kung isa lang ka dot, that represents the vy nato, equals 0.001 times 2x, and ang derivative sa x, that is x dot. Are you familiar with chain rule? Na-discuss ba ni sa inyong calculus before, calculus 1? Especially ka ng diretso lang i-differentiate ang isa ka equation. Are you familiar with chain rule? Pero usually manggod ang chain rule manggod diri sa to ang equation, mura gi-differentiate lang nimo ang each term. In layman's term, you just differentiate each term. So you differentiate y. So unsa may hang derivative sa y with respect to time, we always when we differentiate, it is with respect to time because we're talking about velocity and acceleration. So for derivative of y with respect to time, that is y dot or vy, and ang 0.001 x squared, derivative po ana, so ang x squared nimo will be bring down ang 2, tapos may muna siya 2x, then derivative dayon sa imuhang variable na x, which is x dot, which is equivalent to the x component sa imong velocity, which is vx. So therefore, for this one, just an example sa chain rule, di ba? For example, kani, y is equal to, ang very common manggod sa chain rule manggod, okay, 0.5 x plus 1 cube. Kana. Kung gamiton na tong chain rule, ang ato ginabuhat y prime is equal to 0.5, bring down 3, then x plus 1 tapos squared, kay 3 minus 1 is 2. Tapos derivative sa imuhang sa sulod, that would be x prime plus 0, kay 1 is constant man. So mao ni ang pag-apply sa chain rule. So the same atong gibuhat dire. When we apply chain rule, when we differentiate each term with respect to time, so may mo na siya y dot, so mao na ang Vy is equal to 0.002 a 0.001 times 2 is 0.002 x, and x dot is Vx. Kanina, familiar mo ani? Kanya ko ang gisulat na example, another example. Did you remember this one, this part? Mo ng chain rule. Kanang y is equal to 0.5 x plus 1 cube. Are you familiar on that?
Yes, sir.
Ang product rule o quotient rule. Naka-remember pa mo product and quotient rule? Amo nang gamit po sa pag-derivative, especially sa product and quotient rule. But so much for that. Actually, ang chain rule, ginagamit nato ni siya here, especially this one, para ma-differentiate nato ang given expression or function na y is equal to 0.001 x squared. So, when we differentiate, it will be with respect to time, mao na that is d over dt. Okay? Always with respect to time atong i-consider. So, for this one, na naman tayo Vy, that is 10. Okay? Ang Vx, mao ng unknown. And ang x is unknown. Asa na ito makuha ang x? We just only get here from this equation. Kaning path na to. Nalaman tayo equivalent na y, which is 100 meters. So, unsa may equivalent na x niya, which is this one. Unsa ang equivalent x value when y is equal to 100 meters. So, for y is equal to 100 meters, we just substitute here sa tong equation sa path. So that would be 100 is equal to 0.001 x squared. So that would be 100 over 0.001. O pila man na to ang 100 over 0.001 na to?
100,000.
100,000? Tama? 100. Tama ba? 100,000? Hindi ko sure ha, kay wala na ko calculator. 100,000? Tama ba? How about the others? 100,000?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sir.
Okay, 100,000. So, square root
Yes, sir.
lang na to each side. Ang kani, di ba kung square root, meaning anak kay positive or negative? But since the path acts it acts along the quadrant 1, meaning x and y are positive, so positive root atong gamiton, so unsa man ang square root 100,000 nato? $316.23. So the value of x, if y is equal to 100 meters, that is 316.23 meters. Voila! Nanatay x, and Vy is 10 meters per second. So when we substitute here in our equation, we can now identify the x component of a velocity, which is Vx. So that would be 10, 0.002, 316.23 Vx. O pila man si x component sa to ang velocity. We try to solve this this equation. So 10 divided by 0.002 0.002 times 316.23. So what will be the answer of our Vx?
$15.81.
Pila? 15.81.
81.
15.81. Okay? So meaning kung positive, meaning that is it acts along the positive x-axis. So your Vx is equal to 15.81 meters per second going to the right. Okay? So nalatay Vx and Vy. And then we can determine the magnitude of your velocity. Kaya di ba kung mag-determine tayo sa magnitude sa imong velocity, that is by using Pythagorean theorem. So just a continuation on what we had um, just a continuation sa tugisolve kanina. So to determine the magnitude of your velocity, that is using Pythagorean theorem, Vx squared plus Vy squared. Okay, basta kung naalang kay x and y components sa imong velocity, you can now determine its you can determine already the magnitude of your velocity. So ang atong Vx was 15.81. So that is 15.81 squared. And your Vy is 10, like what I mentioned, rising with a constant velocity of 10 meters per second. So meaning, Anna, that is the y component of your velocity. So what will be your magnitude of your velocity? Square root 15.81 squared plus 10 squared, 18.71 meters per second. So the answer of our magnitude sa ato ang velocity is 18.71 meters per second. So when we actually draw here, di ba when we describe or when we draw, rather, when we locate the velocity sa curved path, it is always tangent sa imuhang particle or sa imuhang path sa imuhang particle itself. So, ang velocity nato na 18.71 is tangent siya din sa imuhang plane. So, mao na ang imuhang 18.71 meter per second. And the two components, 10, mao na imuhang 10 meters per second. And this is the y component sa imong velocity, 10 meters per second. And for the x component of your velocity, that is 15.81 meter per second. And also, pwede po ninyo na ma-identify ang iyahang direction, ang angle. But since wala man na gipangita sa imong problem, magnitude lang, so mao na magnitude lang ato ang gipangita. Pero kung angle, if we determine its angle, that is by using this formula, especially if we determine its direction, the direction of the velocity. So that is represented with the angle theta equal to the inverse tan of the y component over the x component. Okay, so when we consider two-dimensional man, trigonometric function lang atong gamiton. So for the direction of the velocity, we use this equation na inverse tan of y component over the x component, or vy over the vx. But since diri sa tong problem, is wala man gipangitang direction, so only the magnitude. So this will be your um, final answer, which is 18.71. For the acceleration, the same lang atong buhaton. So just a continuation, we need to determine also the magnitude of your acceleration. I-divide lang nimo into its components, x and y. So we consider first the y component. Okay, mas dali man itong y component. Di ba ang Vy nato given, which is the y component of velocity is 10 meters per second upward, or it is rising, meaning that is a positive 10 meters per second. Ang y component sa imohang acceleration will be equal to 0. Okay, since constant man ang imohang y component sa velocity. Since if you use this kinematic equation na a is equal to dv over dt, you will come up with the answer na 0 ang imohang ay. So therefore, kung diretso nato i-identify ang y component sa acceleration, that will be equal to 0 meter per second. So nanatay y component sa acceleration. Ang atong problemahon na lang ani kay ang sa x component. Ang sa x component nato, based sa gisolve nato kanina, that was Vy is equal to 0.002 x Vx. Okay? So sa x component, on finding the x component of the acceleration, using this expression, we will also gamitong gyapon nato ang chain rule of calculus on finding the x component of your acceleration. And for this one, the same mga to gibuhat kanina na we differentiate with respect to time. So ang derivative sa Vy with respect to time mo na ang Ay, or di ba ang kuan ana is ano na lang, that would be Vy dot. So we say Vy dot, that is Vy dot is the derivative of your velocity with respect to time, which is equal to the acceleration, the y component of your acceleration, and equal to 0.002 xvx. Take note, xvx are different entities or different variables. So since mag-differentiate man mo ani sa right side, which is 0.002 xvx, take note this x and vx are different variables ni sila, and also naka-multiply. So in that case, what we will do is we will use product rule. Di ba kung pasabot sa product rule? Product rule is VDU UDV plus VDU. Familiar mo sa product rule? Are you familiar with product rule? Kung quotient rule kay VDU minus UDV over V squared. Tama? Mao man yang sa quotient rule, di ba? So, ang usually ako ginagamit na term is kaning naka UDV, VDU. Kay ang pasabot mga ana is ang each variable is i-differentiate nimo or pangitawon nimo ang iyang derivative. So if we let u as x and v as vx, So here, datang nako dire. Zero point zero zero two. So using the product rule, UDV plus video. So U nimo is X iyahang DU is X dot and the DV is VX dot. So ang X dot nato, meaning ana that is the VX, ang VX dot nato equivalent ana is the AX or the X component sa imohang acceleration. So UDV plus VDU, U is X, DV is VX dot plus VDU, V is VX, and the DU is X dot. So nanakay, derivative sa imohang right side using the product rule. So for that, i-substitute na to ang equivalent ning sa dot notation nimo. Ang Vy dot, that is actually AY. So equal to 0.002 X Vx dot, that is AX, plus Vx, and the X dot, the equivalent for that is also Vx. Basta take note, X dot, that is equal to Vx, Y dot is equal to Vy. Tapos kung i-derivative nimo ni ang each component sa velocity, so V dot, Vx dot is equal to Ax and Vy dot is equal to Ay. Okay, so nanatay ko ato gipangitaman ani is ang x component sa acceleration, which is the Ax. So ang Ay 0 na naman ta kanina, kaning 0. X nanatay value sa x, that is 316.23. Vx also nanatay Vx, that is kung dito sa previous solution 15.81. So diri siya nato i-substitute diri sa tong equation. 0 is equal to 0.002 316.23 AX plus 15.81 squared. So ang nabili na lang na variable is the x component sa acceleration, which mao na to ang pangitaon. So pila man na, adre na lang ta. Pila man na to ang value sa AX. What is the value of our AX? So ang sa matubuhaton dire, mawala ning 0.002 kay kung i-divide na to, ma-cancel out si 0.002, transpose ang koan, ang 15.81 squared, sabi mo na siya negative 15.81, so that would be negative 15.81 squared over 316.23. So pila man na to ang AX nato. What's the value of our AX?
Negative 2, negative 0.79, sir.
Negative
2.249 nata.
ano man, negative 0.79 or negative 2 point, negative 0.79? Ay, sorry, acceleration man din no, so squared, meter per second squared na siya, dili meter per second because that is for velocity. So for acceleration, meter per second squared. So pila man na to ang koan? AX, negative 0.79. Tama? So first ninyo kay 15.81 squared over 316.23. I think it is 0.79. I am not sure. 15.79 ata.
Negative 0.79.
0.79, negative 0.79 or 0.80. Okay? So, negative. Meaning sa negative, it acts along the left side or the negative x-axis. So, ang imong AX is 0.79 meter per second going to the left. So, after we identify the x and y components, forgot the squared, so meter per second squared. So after we identify the x and y components in mga acceleration, the same lang atong gibuhat sa velocity using Pythagorean theorem. So just applying the Pythagorean theorem, that is ax squared plus ay squared. So that would be negative 0.79 squared plus 0 squared. So since 0 naman na nga to ang y component sa acceleration or the ay, so the magnitude of your acceleration is 0.79 meter per second squared. Okay? So if you notice, gamay ang iyahang value, 0.79 meter per second squared. And if we draw here sa to ang path, it acts here, ang ato ang A, which is equal to 0.79 meter per second squared. So say pasabot ana kung going to the left side. Kung say pasabot anang kuan nato sa how you analyze the acceleration rather. How will you analyze the acceleration here?
Slow down siya, sir. Decelerate.
Nag-slow down or nag-decelerate. It's because the fact that its x component is negative, which is a deceleration, and at the same time, its y component is 0. So at this moment, where the y is 100 meters and x is 316.23, ang acceleration nimo is slowing down or nag-decelerate. So, kung makita niyo dire sa figure, this type of acceleration is a deceleration.